Let's talk about this story because I know, and I think we've certainly talked about it on this program, that you sit on the board of the Ohio Innocence Project. Remind people what that is, and then let's talk about what is a record-breaking and also a heartbreaking case that got resolved today. I mean, in some ways, we're sort of breaking some news.
Yeah. I do. I sit on the board of the Ohio Innocence Project, and so to explain what that is, there are innocence projects in many states around the country, and so obviously this is not unique in that way. But the Ohio one has been a particularly vigorous one, and I was honored when they sort of asked me to be a part of it. And what it does is, we go in when we get sort of evidence that, or any sort of inclination, and not sort of somebody saying, "I just think so," but when somebody really comes to us and we have a good reason to believe that somebody who's in prison is innocent, we go to bat for them in every way we possibly can. We've got a team of amazing students that are at the University of Cincinnati Law School, which is where it's based here. It's based at UC. They actually get credit for this, and they work and research and try to find everything they can about the case. We go and obviously meet with those who have been incarcerated. We recently, and that was one of the big things that happened with this case, we were able to raise enough funds to hire investigators who literally in this case went and knocked door to door to see if people remembered things from 40 years ago, and it turned out somebody did. So we do what we can to get people who are innocent out of prison. And, the more you do this, you will learn, sadly, and it certainly will make you start questioning certain things you believe. I would tell you, certainly, if you're a death penalty supporter, because I can't tell you how many times you come across something where the evidence was staring people in the face that somebody wasn't guilty, but the easiest thing to do was just to make them guilty. Or it was based on racism or something else. And so that's what we do in general. In this case, there's a man who literally at 9 o'clock this morning walked out of prison in Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland, the Cleveland area. Cleveland's in Cuyahoga County. His name's Ricky Jackson, and this is now a record breaker in terms of he had spent the longest time in prison in the history of this country for a crime he didn't commit, at least that we know of at this point. He was in prison for 39 years. And the story itself is heartbreaking in that he and two other men, they're African American, and this will sound sadly familiar. I don't want to make this all about race, but clearly race played a big role here. A man was murdered who was white, and there were these three guys, and the police decided they were guilty. And they were going to arrest them, and they did not have evidence they needed. The police were white. So they went to a 12-year-old boy, I don't know how they came upon him, who's African-American, and basically pressured him and threatened him to tell the story with all the details that they told him and say that he had seen it when he had not. He was 12 at the time. You'd have to imagine the power relationship if you're an African-American 12-year-old in 1975.
Let me quote from the story, because this is, obviously you're in prison for 39 years. I find it impossible to wrap my arms around the notion of being in prison for 40 years for a crime that you knew you did not commit. And what do you do when you walk out of prison? But this story of Ed Vernon, too, is also heartbreaking. This is the guy who was a 12-year-old. He's now in his 50s. He had been he had told the cops. Well, this is what the piece in the Huffington Post says. He was in court on Monday and Tuesday. He explained that at first he believed in his 12-year-old mind that he was doing the right thing by making up the story to help police solve the crime. But his mother knew that he was lying and told him that when the police called him downtown to identify the suspects in a lineup, he should refuse to identify them, and that would be the end of it. He did as his mother told him, but the detectives would not accept his recantation. He's a 12-year-old boy. Detectives took him into a room and screamed at him, threw objects around the room, told the crying 12-year-old that his parents would be sent to prison for perjury if he didn't change his story. They got him to sign a statement implicating the suspects with details about the murder that they had fed to him. And they had him claim in the statement that he didn't identify the suspects in the lineup because he was too scared. Vernon explained to the judge this week, I was a black kid, poor and uneducated from the neighborhood. A white man had been killed. I didn't know anything about the justice system. Do you really think as a 12-year-old I could stand up to those detectives screaming in my face? Vernon sobbed on the stand when he described how his lie from the pits of hell had ruined his life and how he had finally felt relief when he had confessed to his pastor recently. I mean, all of this is just so heartbreaking.
It is, because it's not just one life. These three gentlemen who were there in prison lost over 100 years of combined time for crimes none of them committed. Okay, then you've got this 12-year-old who, is living with this. He's had health problems because of it. I mean, living this tortured life because he knew he told this lie that ruined people's lives that he did not want to tell. And then you wonder also, they now have a pretty good idea that there was somebody with a similar MO to this who'd committed other murders. So I don't even know this part of the story, but how many people were hurt afterwards because the right person was not pursued? I mean, it's incredibly upsetting. But I would say to you at the same time, I mean, all of us who work with the Innocence Project here, I can't tell you, with everything else bad going on in the world and everything, walking around today, I don't know that I've ever felt this good about what I've done in my work life, ever. Because just what comes with knowing that as much as I wish I could give everything back to these people who are hurt, but we were able to give them their lives back in some way. For this, Ricky Jackson lost from 20 to 59 in prison. But hopefully he'll still have many years on this earth, and he'll be able to go out and live a life, and with this Innocence Project, it's just been on 11 years in Ohio, and not that much longer, any of them nationally. So this wouldn't have been around and available to anybody pre-11 years ago. This would have been a life sentence for him. And what's key about all this also, a few other things I'd like to mention. One is that I think initially some of the prosecutors, because of course they don't want to look bad, 10 years ago or so went to him and said if he would just admit he was guilty and say that he was sorry, they would let him go. Because I think we're starting to see that evidence was mounting. He didn't do it, and he refused to do that. He would not admit, he would not say that he had done something he didn't do just to get out of prison, which, if you can picture yourself in that situation, that is rather amazing in and of itself to me, that he was such a man of principle, that he wasn't going to do that. But, again, I brought up the racial aspect of it, the power of police versus citizens, which, we've all seen and may see, depending upon when this decision comes down in Ferguson, that's been in the news recently. Also, what we've seen go on in a number of states, including, not ironically enough, Ohio, where the death penalty, we've had people lying on gurneys for an hour, not dying, but suffering because of this mix of chemicals, because we're still up there with Saudi Arabia and China and Iran and other, Somalia and whoever else, as one of the only countries that executes people on this earth. And so to me, whatever your belief was, and I must admit, I always admit that I've generally been a progressive guy for most of my life, but there was a period in time where I believed in the death penalty. I'll say that. And probably a good 8-10 years ago, more than that, maybe a dozen years ago, I came to realize, because when you start looking at the system and realize that the fallibility of the system, realize that mistakes can be made, but then purposeful things can be done, that racism plays a role, that the type of how wealthy you are and the type of lawyer you get, and all the different ways that it's arbitrary. One person gets a death penalty for something in one state, one person doesn't get it in the other state. But I mean, the biggest thing of all, cases like this, where innocent people can be executed. One of the three, not Ricky, but one of the other gentlemen who was in prison also for this, wrongly imprisoned for this, was 20 days away from being executed. So for anybody out there who really wants to still make the claim that we've never executed anybody innocent, I'm telling you that you literally are stuffing your head in the sand. That all 30 of these guys, if Ohio's statute hadn't been found, death penalty statute hadn't been found unconstitutional in the late 70s, which it was, and they needed to come up with a new one, which they did. But if it wasn't for the luck of timing in that happening, these three men would be dead. They would have all been executed. And the only reason they weren't was because of that. So, there's so many important parts about this story, and what we need to learn from it going forward. And so, and again, I mean, I've never been a part of anything that has made me feel, I mean, this is something where I sit on the board, so this isn't a client.
Right.
I don't get paid. I give my time. I don't make any money off of it, and you know what? It makes it feel that much better. Just that I could play any role in this. So
yeah, it's an amazing, and I think I've spoken to some folks from from the Innocence Project. I mean, and these all around the country. But yes, I am partial to arguments against the death penalty in a broader sense, but certainly there's no evidence that it's in any way effective or that we're not killing the innocent people. It's just wow, it's just an amazing story, and I certainly hope like in a situation like this. I hope that the state steps in and just gives an award to these guys rather than making them go and sue for 10 years. Because, I mean, look, you've been in prison for 40 years. You have the times where you would develop all sorts of skills.
that's right.
And you're in your mid-50s. It's hard enough, frankly, for people who are in their mid-50s who have not been in prison for the past 40 years, who are out of work.
Not that you're way off, but yeah, he's actually 59. I mean, not that that makes a huge difference from 55, but still. And when you went in when you're 20, I'm glad you brought this up, because I was going to bring this up, and I was going to say, I hope that you'd be amenable. There's a GoFundMe page right now for him, which I can send you a link if you're willing to throw up at the site, because we're trying to raise $30,000. Because again, he has no way of making any money. He's we're hoping that the state just gives him a settlement. Ohio actually is very progressive in that way, partially because long before I got on the board, so no credit goes to me, the head of the program, Mark Godsey, was able to go and fight in Columbus and get legislation passed in Ohio to award these guys, real money for what they suffered. And so at some point he will get that, but I'm hoping the state does the right thing and gives it to him immediately. Because again, in the meantime, we've got a fund that we're going to try to do to buy him some clothing and some toiletries and some basics. And, they just took him out to his first meal up in Columbus. Up in Cleveland after, and that's all great. But he's got to live day to day now until something happens without those skills, without any real way to make money. So I appreciate it. I'm going to send that to you, Sam.
Yeah, I am it to me now, and we'll put it up on the site in minutes. I mean, remember, for the Central Park 5, it took them, yes, I think, about, in some instances, 13 years. Maybe it was 7 or 8 years for the rest of them. And they just basically got their settlement, I think, a couple of weeks ago, basically because de Blasio, when he came in, was like, all right, we're done pretending that this city didn't screw up and destroy these guys' lives. And, they're all 10, 15 years younger and spent, anywhere from 20 to 25 years less in prison. And still, it's heartbreaking. So, yes, please send us that link. I IM'd it to you, okay. So it should be right there. And yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, again, this is even the most extreme case, but it happens to plenty of other people. When they first asked me to join, I went out to lunch with this terrific guy named Dean Gillespie, who was in prison for 19 years for a rape he didn't commit. And so again, 39 may be the worst of it, but you end up meeting lots of people who lost 8 years, 12 years, 19 years. And you have to think about what you lose in terms of income, in terms of, and emotional distress and everything for that too. I mean, it's not like if it's not 39 years, it's nothing. Right. It's still, think of a couple of years of your life spent in prison for something you didn't do, and how terrible that would be. So I really appreciate your willingness to talk about this, Sam, and I talk about it because I have a firsthand knowledge because I'm involved, but I'm not seeking any credit. This is not about me at all, man. This is about those lawyers, students who sit there and work their butts off in law school all hours for this, a couple of the staff lawyers who give up high-paying legal jobs to come and do this. I mean, it's really, truly amazing. So you want to feel good about something, that we're righting some wrongs, even on we always talk about doing that on the grassroots level and not always having to be about presidential politics, or whatever. These are the ways you can do that. I mean, there's many other ways besides the Innocence Project, but people can get involved in all sorts of ways.
and it's a good thing.